So, am I dying? Well, as of right now, I do not have a terminal condition or disease that I am aware of. But like all of us over 30, my body is declining. And being over 50, it is declining at a quicker rate. I don't even recall thinking about 50 when I was young. It just wasn't a serious topic. But I do recall a bunch of us once saying, live fast, die young, and leave a good looking corpse. What did you think 50 would look like when you were young?
So when I was younger, I really didn't think a lot about what life would be like when I was 50 or older. It did seem really distant. My dad was lucky enough to retire, I think, at 55. I would have been about 20, 21. Right around that time, he also kind of had a heart scare, and it surprised me. That really slowed him down. It's probably my most vivid memory of someone in their 50s.
When I look at the age of 50, I look back at the time when I was 25 years old. That's a whole lifetime away. That 25 years literally just went like a snap. Once you kind of get through all of that, you look back and you realize how short the time really was.
I didn't know exactly what 50 was going to look like when I was young. When you're in your 20s, you think you know everything. Golly, 50, oh my gosh, that's one step away from the grave.
50-year-olds are old farts, and I'm never gonna be one of those.
When I was a teenager, I thought that the 18s, everybody was like the same. Of course, when I turned 25, I saw that it was very, very different.
When you're like a teenager, right, like 50 just seems impossibly old, right? So when I was in my 20s, I didn't really think about much about being older. Like you're just caught up in all the things you're doing at that age, right? When I was young, I would think that people who were 50 had accomplished what they wanted to accomplish when they were younger. They had everything all figured out and were also very just kind of set in their ways.
Now that I'm in my 50s, I guess what I'm really thinking about is my mortality. Because certain events have occurred that have me contemplating this stage of my life. That is a great and kind of funny quote. Now, I'm only 58 right now, and I wonder, is it normal to be thinking about my mortality? I'm not obsessed by it, but it does pop up in my mind more often than I thought it would.
I think it's very interesting to hear that other people are taking stock of their lives right now and thinking about where they are in this way, and it's not just me kind of having this little existential crisis of my own, where other people are experiencing the same.
Yeah, man, mortality. It, it comes up quite often. I would say maybe like once or twice a day. And it could be triggered by a lot of things. Something you hear, something you see, but it's just a lot more on the forefront now. As well as because because I'm older, I have older friends, older family members, and they're a part of my life as well too. And so anything that happens to them with their family members, right? I'm hearing about it and I'm feeling it, right? And so I relate to it, and so it affects me, and so I'll think about it quite often, Um, yeah.
So what's the last part of life gonna be like? Mortality. It's kind of flagged in me a little bit. My mother passed away a couple of years ago, and that's kind of a tough one. My dad's 86, 87.
It's hard not to think, gosh, 2/3 of this game is already behind me at this point, if I'm lucky. I think about my mortality a lot when, you see people that pass away that were younger than you, or, once again, classmates, people that we knew from back in the day, or kids that you grew up with that will never see their 60th birthday. But, you can't help but realize that the clock is running, and it makes you realize how temporary this game really is.
As a layman, this is what I know about the aging process. Physically, we reach our peak in our 20s. In our 30s, our body begins to change. And like I said before, in our 50s, those changes occur at an accelerated rate. And those changes can be different in everyone. Some of the common changes are reduction in strength and flexibility, suffering more aches and pains, and slower recovery from strenuous activity. Our skin gets more dehydrated and we get more wrinkles. And then, of course, my favorite, weight gain right here in the middle of your body. So yes, scientifically speaking, I am dying physically. But that doesn't mean I've reached my peak as a person back in my 30s.
Coming up on 60 years of age, the biggest thing that I miss is having the energy that I had 30 years ago.
I think I probably am in the perimenopause stage, but not a whole lot of symptoms that I can tell, except maybe hormonal. I mean, I have aches and pains more so now than I did, 10, 15 years ago, but nothing that keeps me from doing my normal thing.
I like to get outdoors and road bike, mountain bike. I know even now, as I maintain, regular rides, it's like I need more recovery. Not able to necessarily keep up as much and do things that I used to do. And I'm not trying hard to maintain that. I recognize it. It's like I'm gonna be a little slower. Probably a bad thing to try too hard at this point. I don't want to cause a heart problem by overdoing it.
At 50, you start feeling a little bit more sore knees, sore elbows, body's not quite what it used to be, those kind of things, yeah. A little overweight, definitely out of shape.
Do I feel different as a 50-year-old? Honestly, yeah, I feel older. One of my constant sayings as I get into or out of the car is, "Ow, my back." One of the things that I've been gauging nowadays is my ability to put on socks without assistance.
It's just more change than I thought I would experience. And most of them physical changes, right? Just getting older, perimenopause, really a challenge in lots of ways. Like I wasn't really expecting my body to kind of do all kinds of crazy things on me.
After Googling for information on the average age of life expectancy for both men and women, I ended up going down a rabbit hole that just boggled my mind. I noticed that over the last 3 years, the average age of life expectancy had been dropping in the US. Then it occurred to me, what if we removed all the deaths associated with COVID, the epidemic of mass shootings, murders, suicides, war? And wouldn't that number go up? And if so, maybe those numbers don't apply to you or me, especially after I read an article stating that 2/3 of the US population will reach their 80s. That's when I realized trying to find a number is pointless. Regardless of whatever numbers you use, 50 does seem to mark the beginning of the last third of our life cycle. Here's what I mean. The first third of our lifespan could be birth to 25. I call this the years of invincibility. We think we know everything, and we think we can do anything. The second third could be 25 to 50. I call this the years of mental growth and experience building. Our final third would be 50 to whatever age, our decline to death. Or is it? And when do we reach our peak? Looking back on my 20s, the only peak I see is my physical abilities, my strength, my agility, and my stamina, which is why, biologically, our 20s is our physical peak. I think the real rise as a more complete person began around 35 or so. That was a great combination of excellent health, greater knowledge, and a little bit of more wisdom. But I still wouldn't say that that is my peak. Because as we grow older, what is happening in our head, in our hearts, has a far greater significance than our physical prowess. So from 35 on, that rise as a person is still climbing. And I like seeing that myself. So no, 50 to whatever age is not the decline to death. Instead, it's our time to continue that climb that we started in our 30s. It's our time to reach our peak. However, during this time, we may need to change our perspective.
Yeah, I think I've changed my focus to some degree. And when I was younger, keep going, moving faster. I got to go to the next thing. Now I can kind of stop and pause and think. Actually, planning to retire next year. I enjoy my work, but I wouldn't say I'm quite as fulfilled by it. Kind of looking beyond, and I enjoy the relaxation time and spending time with my sons who are now older and grown, and probably going to be grandchildren soon. I want to be able to spend time, that quality time.
Most definitely, I've changed the way I think because the dynamics have changed. The parameters, the game pieces have all been rearranged, basically, right? And yeah, I do want to spend more time focusing on myself and what I can try and contribute to, my little world. But the priorities have changed. So family and friendship, it's become a huge priority where wanting to focus more of my time on those relationships and building upon those relationships because when we didn't have time when we were younger, we were so busy, you didn't have the time to kind of like really know somebody. And now that the kids have grown up, now that like I'm retired semi, you know, I have the time to actually focus on closer and more intimate relationships with my family and friends.
Unless somebody actually asks you, you probably don't even think about your age. But events can affect how we feel about ourselves and reinforce the fact that we aren't getting any younger. Even happy ones can make us feel older, like your kids or the kids of your friends getting married. Seems like they were a baby just a minute ago. And some events can make us feel like the clock is ticking, such as a classmate passing away, and all of a sudden you're flooded with memories of days gone by. Do we just sweep these events under the rug like we did when we were young and never thought about age? If so, maybe we aren't any different than we were when we were young. And if that is true, aren't we repeating history and expecting a different outcome? As we move forward, we do need to think differently and make plans for our future selves.
As you get older, hopefully you're getting wiser and your intelligence has grown where you're making some better choices. I constantly am reevaluating. It's a goal to try and be very well rounded, where I'm there for my wife, I'm there for my kids, I'm there for my grandkids.
Thinking about different priorities than I had when I was younger, right? All of those goals that and things that I had driven through in my career, right? Logical steps. Suddenly, like I don't have a next logical step. Like I've kind of achieved my little ticked off list of things that I had imagined I'd wanted to do when I was younger, and now I'm like, well, now I can do what I want. And what do I want? Right? So I'm kind of figuring out what I want to do next. Now that I'm in my young 50s. Mm-hmm.
When I think about my mortality, it's not that I fear it's going to happen anytime soon. It's more like now that I'm over 50, I'm reminded of it more. Think about it. Remember a time when you may have said something like, oh, that's never going to happen to me, or that's a long way off. Well, now we tend to say things like, oh my, he was the same age as me, or she was so much younger than me. This is why we need to change the way we think. We just don't have the luxury of saying, I'll get to my family time later, or we'll take that trip in a few years, or whatever it is we tend to put off in order to pursue something else or to avoid the discomfort of change.
It was a normal day. The family had plans to go, travel for Thanksgiving. I was taking my dog to the sitter and sitting at a red light, just waiting for the light to change. And out of the blue, out of nowhere, just bam! Like I got slammed, and it happened in an instant. Got drug across the street, and just had a concussion. And at that moment, you can't plan for this stuff. You just don't know when it's going to happen. It can happen anywhere at any time, right? And it's just that feeling of uncontrollability is just it can be very unnerving, and it can control you at times. because you keep thinking about that over and over and again. So um, it's a very difficult time in my life, and you realize that like everything can be taken away in an instant.
The event that changed my thinking happened the year I turned 50. My mother died. About 6 years prior to that, my father passed away. They were only 72. When my father passed, I was only 44, and my own mortality never crossed my mind. But my mom's passing, that was a surprise, and it happened rather quickly. Now, at this point, I was like everyone else. I was living in the moment. I didn't look or feel 50. In fact, I wore it like a badge of honor because no one believed I was that old. I worked out every day, I swam, played tennis, and I was very active. But her sudden passing left me questioning everything. What didn't make sense to me, and even made me angry, was that my mom was living her dream of living in Florida. But she only got to do it for about a year and a half. It didn't seem fair, and it told me that nothing was guaranteed, and we may not have the option of having more time to do something that we love. I didn't feel like death was knocking on the door, but I did feel like I needed to do something. I could have gone back to work and carried on as usual, but that just didn't feel right. Then I asked myself, what am I doing with my life? Well, my mother's passing opened up a conversation between me and my wife. And that's exactly what we discussed. What do we want to do with our lives? Before my mom passed, she told me to go buy a sailboat. It's what your dad would have wanted. Now, I thought it was a little random at the time, but she does know me. During the conversation with my wife, I told her what my mother had said, and that's when we realized we both had a passion for sailing. The topic never came up before because we were so engrossed in our jobs and never thought outside the box we were living in. So after about 3 months of talking and 5 months of planning, we decided to sell everything and move on to a sailboat with our 2 dogs. Yes, it did seem a little crazy at the time, and I was nervous, but I knew it was just something I had to do. However, I needed to redefine how I thought about what the next part of my life was going to look like. No matter how hard I worked, I knew I couldn't buy more time, but I did know that I could run out of it.
One thing I did relatively recently, I was 46, I decided I wanted to ride a motorcycle. I'd always wanted to ride a motorcycle, something that I did for me. I mean, I wanted to do it. My sons were at an age where they wouldn't necessarily need me if something did happen. But yeah, I mean, it's literally a dangerous sport. You see it all the time. But I enjoyed it, and it's something I wanted to do. It's a freedom. Nothing like just pulling that throttle and feeling the pull. It's like that's a lot. It's a lot of horsepower.
What facilitated it? Was it accomplished enough or the clock is ticking?
Probably a little bit of both. I wanted to do it while I still had the ability. It basically was like a time in my life when I felt I could take some risks that were for me.
So I retired a couple years ago, and after spending 30 years in the military and doing the same job, and I got so tired of it. I needed to do a complete 180, and I wanted absolutely nothing to do with what I did in the military. Yeah, it took me some time, maybe about 6 months. I wasn't really doing something that I really, really wanted to do, because that transition is actually very difficult. It's like moving houses or getting married or having kids. That's a major event, retiring, and then wanting to do something completely different. Wanted to get back to knowing where I came from, my culture, my heritage, and I think that's really important to know that, so that way you get a strong base of like who you are. And
So how did you achieve this?
so I looked around for programs. Went back to school. I'm in grad school right now, and for Asia Pacific Studies. Oh my God, the stuff that I have learned in the past 3 semesters about the Asian history and culture, it's the kind of stuff they'll never teach you in high school. You won't know about this stuff until you actually like dive into it. It's been very eye opening. I'm really excited. I'm really excited as to am I graduating next in this coming May. Really looking forward to like where that's going to take me. You know,
Has that added a sense of fulfillment?
for sure. I'm not the best in regards to discipline, but it's actually helped me to focus my time and my energy and just learning so much about my background and cultures. For me, it's just been personally fulfilling, you know, to be able to do that. Treasure for me, you know, that I want to have, and at the same time, I want to be able to share that treasure with my family and friends.
As far as the things that I really enjoy, if you say, what do you do really just for you? I'm very fortunate enough. I've always had a love of automobiles, so I'm in a place where I'm able to have several classic cars that I truly enjoy. I find a lot of peace in just walking out the door of my house and walking down to my barn and being able to go in there. And it's very nostalgic because one of them is a car very similar to what you and I cruised around in high school. And, you know, one of them was my dad's last car. And of course, in the barn, there's things that remind me of my childhood and remind me of my teenage years, which brings back just a flood of great memories.
Yeah, right now I'm learning to sail, and it's really bringing me tremendous joy. There's something so beautiful about being out on the water and in nature, and it's very tactile and experiential, and but you're responding to kind of all these elements around you, right? So maybe it's a metaphor for life. And every time I'm out on the boat, I feel very grateful to just have that experience.
So you've heard some of my story and those of others that have turned 50, and how they view it now with years of experience under the belt. Some of us have had similar experiences, and some of us may have had drastically different events. The common thread is none of us are truly prepared. We didn't have a clue in our 20s about what our 30s would be like, nor did we have a clue about our 40s. But as wiser adults, unlike our years of invincibility, we are more likely to reflect on what is happening to us and possibly look for an alternative path. And that is the purpose of this channel. Not only do we want to have a clue about what our futures are going to look like, but to have others to share it with. We want to form a community of knowledge, experience, and sharing. This is your space to engage others by offering your experiences, and to find guidance or comfort from those in a similar place. And this is how you can participate. So to actually form a community, your participation is vital. After all, we can't be a community without you. And here's how you can start. The first thing you can do is click the like button for this video, and also subscribe to the channel so you can become an official member of the community. Share your thoughts in the comments section down below. These two topics, mortality and changing the way you think, well, they're pretty deep topics. We want to know, what do you think, and what is your viewpoint on these topics? Reach out to us if you would like to be interviewed, or email us and share your experience or what topics you would like to see in the future. We have complete details on how to do this in the description section below. Speaking of future topics, in the next 2 episodes, we're going to talk about exercising and trying to stick to it, and trying to maintain a healthier diet. In future episodes, we're going to cover such topics as caring for aging parents, focusing on relationships and family, having kids at a later age, how to have fun, keeping up with technology or not, and maintaining our mental health. As we take this journey together, we really want you to participate. We want to hear your voice and your viewpoint. It's important to us, and it's important to other viewers. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And as we move forward in 2024, remember this: challenge the way you are thinking, and enjoy your life after 50.